grants for businesses. And then we're going to have a longer conversation, I think, about out of school time programming and a lot of opportunities there to continue the work of the Joint Committee. So we have a bill before us that was introduced by the lead sponsors, Council President Albornoz and Councilmember Nancy Navarro, and then I think pretty much all of us are co-sponsors. I think Council President Albornoz is in public safety. I'll ask Councilmember Navarro if she'd like to make any comments, and then we can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Well, I think this is truly a continuation of what this council has prioritized, which is to find ways to enhance and provide access to quality childcare, both from the consumer side, but also from the side of those who operate childcare centers in our county, a way to make it more viable. And this particular piece is truly important because it also speaks to the notion that we value those who are childcare practitioners. And we know that there are so many challenges when it comes to compensation and benefits. And so I am really pleased that colleagues have supported this, have elevated this as an innovative way to make a difference. And I think it will definitely have an impact, especially now as we continue to navigate the disruption of the pandemic. So thank you for allowing me to make some comments, and I look forward to the conversation and some of the elements that are incorporated in the bill, including some observations from Olo with our racial equity and social justice impact statement. Thank you.
Excellent. Great. Any other introductory comments? Okay, and then I'll ask, I think raising hands will be hopefully sufficient, but if it seems like I'll go to my co-chair. If there's confusion or something, feel free to text me, of course. Co-chair Craig Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Co-chair. And let me just start off by thanking Councilmember Navarro and Council President Albornoz for recognizing this very important issue. But one, as we discussed last week, the Councilmember Navarro has been at the forefront of for I would say decades at this point, based on her service here in Montgomery County and her service to the community. And one that ties in directly, and this is one of the things that I just wanted to remind folks, that ties in directly with us being set up for success when it comes to the blueprint for education for Maryland, making sure that we have private providers that are there to provide that child care, high quality child care that's affordable and accessible. And the only way we can do that is by supporting these businesses and giving them what they need to be successful. So I just really want to thank Councilmember Navarro and Council President Albornoz for their leadership in truly making sure that we can be set up for success here in Montgomery County. So thank you.
Excellent. All right, Christine, why don't you take us into the legislation?
Thank you very much, Chair Reamer and Chair Rice, and good morning. Thank you, council members. Bill 3821 would require the Director of the Department of Finance to create and administer a local business child care program within the Economic Development Fund. It would be focused on businesses with 50 or fewer employees, and it would provide for a matching grant from the county to match up to 50% of the contributions that an employer makes towards its employees' flexible spending accounts, their federal flexible spending accounts for eligible childcare and dependent care.
Okay. Sorry, Christine, I'll just probably yes. I forgot to introduce our collaborators here today. So why don't we?
Yes, sorry, I overlooked that as well.
No, it's my fault. Pete, why don't you start us off?
Good morning, I'm Pete McGinnity. I'm with the Department of Finance, and I administer the economic development programs at the county.
Great. Dennis?
Good morning, I'm Dennis Hetman. I'm a manager in the Fiscal Management Division of Finance.
Thank you.
Mike will potentially be joining us later. He's sort of triple booked this morning.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Christine, please proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And also we have on the line some representatives from community organizations, chambers of commerce, including Ms. Jones, the chair of the Community Action Board, and Mr. Levine, I believe, is on with the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce, who assisted along the way thus far with this bill. So the council staff packet identifies a few issues, basically walks through the thorough financial impact statement, economic impact statement, racial equity and social justice impact statements. Those are all in the packet. There is one potential amendment discussed. It is at, starts at the bottom of page 4 of the staff memorandum.
Before we get there, why don't we let's have a little general discussion if we could. So I wanted you walked through it. I wanted to maybe Mr. Levine could talk a little bit, but Department of Finance maybe. Is it common for employers to contribute to employees' FSAs for childcare? That's a comment here. I'm familiar with FSAs, but not as familiar with employers contributing to them. So let me just start with that. What do we know about the landscape there? Brian, did you want to comment, or Pete? I'll start with you, Brian. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Reamer. I don't know if it's common. I mean, one of the reasons that we were supportive of this idea, and we thank Council President Albernos and Councilmember Navarro and all the members on this call who are co-sponsors of this bill. I don't know if it's common, but I mean, one of the many reasons besides the lack of affordable and available childcare is we want to, from the business perspective, we want to create some sort of way that Montgomery County stands out as far as a workforce incentive and a business climate incentive, sort of be an island in which they provide this incentive. But I'm sorry, I don't know the answer.
Okay, that's all right. You don't have to. I'm not necessarily saying it has to be common. I'm just trying to understand, what the landscape here. So, it could be that an impact here is that we want employers to contribute to employee FSAs for childcare, and so we're providing some grant funds to help support that. But anyway, that's just sort of a starting point. I was interested in whether it's something that employers often do now or not. And I guess there's, it's a challenge in this topic. There isn't as much data for us to be able to, access. So in any event, this provides for a match for up to 50% of the employer's contribution to the employee's FSA. That's what the legislation provides for. Pete, did you have a comment?
No, only that this is a challenge in the sense that the band that we're looking at are employers with less than 50 employers or less. And so small businesses in the county. Right now, we don't have a sense of how large or how small that is. I know that in the fiscal impact statement that was prepared, there was an indication that the Kaiser Foundation back in 2016 found that companies that had at least 200 employees or more had participation around 75%. But we really don't know what the participation level is going to be at this point in time.
When you say participation level, you're referring to they offered FSAs to their employees?
For childcare, yes. So it's on the sense of existing companies, and also in terms of if this legislation is passed, also what type of incentive might it provide to companies that aren't participating in FSAs for childcare, but would as a result of this because they'd have 50% of their costs reimbursed. So those are really unknowns that we're still dealing with.
Sure. I mean, I think it's you found an avenue. You know, the legislation has found an avenue to support an employee program. I think that's sort of the bottom line. You know, trying to understand what it might mean is the nature of the questions. And so I'm sure there's some data out there about employers with 50 and fewer than 50 employees and how often they offer FSAs. I don't, you know, it would be interesting to know, but we are, you know, it's not necessarily conclusive here one way or the other. Okay, so any other comments here? I guess I'll make my general observation here. This seems to me like it might be most useful as an economic development incentive, where in the portfolio of incentive programs that you're offering to a employer to expand here or to locate here, that you could say, well, we've got this tool. You know, if you're growing, let's say you're a startup and you've secured some kind of progression into your next stage, and you're going to hire, and you want to know if you should hire here and grow here. You know, the county could say, well, there's some tools that we have for you. We've got MOVE program. If you take well, actually, that might not apply for such a first lease, but anyway, you know, we've got various kinds of incentives. One of them is, as you grow, you know, if you set up an FSA for childcare, then we can offer a match for it. You know, that seems quite useful. We don't know how many employers are out there who already offer FSAs and contribute to them, and then might approach the county and say, you know, we'd like to seek a grant for that. I guess that's sort of unknowable, but you know, certainly the former, I think, is quite concrete and it would be useful in that context. Any other comments? Okay. And any comments generally on, Christine, how much, just to try to understand the economics of a 25 or 50 person firm and like what we're talking about here in terms of, you know, the county's potential grant for an employer.
Certainly. Well, and the Department of Finance, please correct me if I misspeak. But currently the FSA for 2022, as I understand it, is $5,000 per employee. That's how much an employee can save under the FSA towards childcare for 2022. It was higher in 2021 due to federal legislation, but now I believe it's going back to the 5,000. So if an employer, for example, contributed $2,500 per employee per FSA, the county match program could potentially give an additional $2,500, maxing out the employee's FSA for the year. So, and then if you had 50 employees, again, finance, please correct me if my math is wrong. I believe you'd have, you know, about $125,000 per business that the county would be paying in its match. And so, you know, it depends how much money is appropriated towards this program. You know, if you wanted to start relatively small as a kind of a pilot and see how it does, I don't know, obviously that's the discretion of the council. But again, it could be about $125,000 per company. So if you allocated $500,000, you would be helping, you know, a handful, like 4 or 5 employers maybe. And Mr. Chair, if I could, I also just wanted to note that in addition to the economic development aspect, you know, from the employee perspective, and I know everyone knows this, but I believe it's noted in the economic impact statement that, you know, infant care in the county, you know, costs about $20,000 a year. Therefore, it's, you know, quite the economic burden on families. And so I think part of the thinking behind this is, you know, any small amount helps, especially on the margins with, and particularly for women in the workforce who are paying for childcare. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other comments, colleagues? Co-Chair Rice, Mr. Jawanda.
Yeah, I just wanted to clear up the math point. As I read it, it was 50% of the contribution, right? So it would be half of whatever the employer contributed is what the county. So, right. So, because I think, so now it wouldn't be if they did 2,500, we did 2,500. If they did 2,500, we do 1,250. Is that correct? Am I getting that right? I see the finance people nodding.
That's our understanding of it. Yes.
Yeah. The way, and I don't think that's what you just said, Christine. I think you said it was 2,500. It might have just been the math, which lawyers.
Yeah, it might be my extremely poor math skills as a lawyer. I apologize.
Well, it's not, I want to say, I wish that finance had given us some scenarios. I mean, the fiscal impact statement literally has nothing about potential costs or what we might allocate towards any kind of business. So that was pretty unusual not to see anything. And I asked Christine yesterday to back of the envelope something for me. But Pete, can you share some?
Yeah, I'm asking for both reasons. Yeah.
What
it would mean for the actual person, but also for what we would need to fund to make it meaningful. So, yeah.
We don't have any basis for determining how many small businesses offer childcare. We haven't got the capacity to do that.
Okay, but
it's not
help
about
us
offering
understand
childcare,
how much it might. Let's just say there was one. How much would we spend? You know, like if there were 10, if there were, I mean, there must be. I don't know how many businesses there are, but I'll turn it to you here. I just want to help understand what we can do with the program, you know, and is this something that is likely for 5 or 10 employers a year, or is this something that might be for 500 or 1,000 employers a year? And then how do you think about, you know, what the cost implications are? Councilmember Navarro.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are very important points. And I think, you know, as I'm sitting here listening to this exchange, I think we could benefit from coming back on this bill. We do have analysts on our central staff, other than our attorneys, who are really there to put, you know, the legal framework and everything. But we should have, you know, Vivian Yao or some other folks come back with some scenarios and answer all those questions. I'm not sure that we're going to answer all of that today unless we have those analysts who have that area of expertise as part of their portfolios. We might be better off, I think, coming back and having something to react to versus just here in real time trying to come up with, you know, scenarios and things like that. So it's just something that I just offer as an alternative, because I think those are very important basic questions that, you know, we should have in front of us so we can make decisions that we can bring to the full council. Something just
yeah. Okay, I appreciate that. I mean, I think it would be useful to have some comments from finance about how they think it will be used. You know,
well, that's going to be important. That will be important. But I think that, I guess, from my perspective, there are two pieces to this, right? So there's sort of like the policy piece, which is, you know, what do we want to achieve? And then finance would have to then, you know, come back with the numbers. But unless we have the framework for the policy piece, then I think those two need to go together. And we have folks on our staff, on central office staff, that are extraordinary experts on all of this as well. So, you know, just, yeah.
I agree. Well said. Thank you. Co-Chair Rice and then Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that we understood from a technical perspective what's going on with our flexible spending account. So the contribution limits, right? There's a limit of how much we can actually do, which is 50%. Is that not correct?
That's correct, as I understand the bill.
Okay. All right. And so if that's the structure that we have in place for what it is that we can do via the vehicle, and we identified, well, not we, Councilmember Navarro and Council President Albornoz working with the chambers and others, we're really trying to make sure that, again, we were looking at how to attract and retain talent while also meeting the need of additional childcare options for individuals. So it's a win-win all around, right? It's something that benefits business when it comes to what it is that we're trying to do supporting business, while also making sure that we're supporting the need that comes out of having employers that are located here in Montgomery County. And one of the things that I did just, if we are going to come back to this, that the racial equity and social justice impact statement is very interesting because it assumes that the majority of folks who would benefit from this are non-people of color, when in fact the bill actually targets, and so I'd like for folks to just, if we're going to be coming back to this, identify the number of small businesses I always thought were predominantly those people of color. So from that standpoint, if I'm incorrect in that, and they quoted some numbers, but they didn't say small business. And so I think that it's important to identify. It says white-owned businesses account for 60% of businesses and more than 90% of business revenue in the county, but we're not talking all businesses, right? We're talking small businesses here. So I think we started off in terms of the analysis from a place that is not where the actual bill identifies. So if we could just drill down, so I do agree with Councilmember Navarro, it'd be helpful to have some of that information identified. I'm in support of what folks are saying in terms of the prioritization of people of color-owned businesses, but I have a feeling that when we get down to those numbers, we'll find out that those percentages are actually going to change based on small business versus larger companies. And so I just like to have that information because I think that'll be helpful as we're continuing to make these decisions on any other amendments we might put forth to the bill.
Yeah. Okay. Councilmember Friedson, followed by Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I think the last point that was made is important. This isn't just an incentive as it is proposed, which I appreciate, by the sponsors, one of whom is with us today. It's for the employees, in their child care. So, I just think it's important that when we talk about the proposal that we not just focus on the businesses, but we also focus on the actual employees who can't afford childcare. That's a problem for business. That's a problem for employees. That's a problem for the county. That's a problem for our economy. I just think it's important that as we move forward, we talk about that. It is a little disappointing that we don't have better data, and so I just did want to note that it's not a criticism. It's just a reflection of the challenge that we face. I mean, we do have some baseline numbers. I mean, unless I'm mistaken, there's like 35,000 business establishments in the county, give or take, or at least that was the prior number. If you look at the state numbers that I've seen, between a quarter and a third of the state business establishments don't have any employees at all. They're LLCs, and we certainly have a lot of those. Somebody who, we've got a lot of brain talent here, and individuals, do consulting and other things, and so they set up LLCs. But so there are some baseline numbers that we can, look at to determine, what percentage of, the number of businesses in the state are registered in Maryland, how many of the businesses in the state of Maryland have no employees, get a rough number, if that's 2/3 of the total number, give or take. I mean, we should have those numbers. If we don't have those numbers, we need to find those numbers. I understand that all of this is imperfect, but we have to sort through it. And then we have to remember there are limits on this, not just 50 or fewer employees. That's 95% of our businesses, give or take, have 50 or fewer employees. There's also income threshold, that we're discussing here too as part of the policy, and so that limits the pool as well. And so we should have data on that. If you look at incomes, and again, none of this data is going to be perfect, but it can at least give us a sense of where this is. And so I just wanted to note that piece. But I do think the point that Councilmember Navarro made, we got to figure out what the goal is here in the policy first, and then we got to make sure that we have appropriate data, understand what we do have, what we don't have, what we can understand, and then figure out how we marry those two items, because this is both a policy objective, and then there's a funding priority, both in administering the program and in providing the type of benefit that we want to get the goal that we think that we need. So I do think coming back to this makes sense. I don't think that any of the data that we're going to have is going to be perfect, but I do think there is data out there, and certainly we can't flesh that out today at this meeting, but we ought to be able to have staff get together, work through those dynamics, and come back to us with where we are.
Okay. Councilmember Navarro, followed by Councilmember Joanna.
Thank you. And yes, I appreciate the issue around the racial, equity, and social impact statement. When we do reschedule, I would like to request that we make sure that Dr. Elaine Bonner Tompkins is available so that she can, again, since we are in need of so much information and backup from our staff, I think it would be great to hear from her what are, some of our observations and also, possible scenarios to address this particular issue. I know she wasn't available today, but I think that is going to be important. So when we do come back, if we can make sure that we accommodate her schedule.
Great. Do that. Councilman Duano.
Thank you. Yes, agree with my colleagues. And as I always take advantage of being able to say, this is my favorite committee because I'm on both. And so I agree with all my colleagues. I would like to also add, if you all remember, one of the things that I had requested on the OLO program was a analysis of who our businesses are, and a deeper dive. And they have money that I understand them to be in the process of contracting with people who can get that information in a real deep way. So maybe, I don't know if it's ready yet, but I would just flag for Christine as your work checking back with Elaine, also check back with Chris Selar and see where they are with that. I do think this comes up a lot in a lot of policy areas of like, who are businesses? What do they need? Where are they? What is their composition? So I think it might not be ready, but I just wanted to flag that that's happening because we need it in a lot of other places as well. And also if we're able to anecdotally even to our community partners, talk to some businesses about, and maybe this was done in the preparation for the bill or could be done, just, if they're not contributing to FSA, those who have FSA, to Councilmember Friedman's point, there's a lot of sole proprietorship. So we can kind of narrow down the group of who this would impact and then maybe get a focus group or something to talk to them to find out how they might, use this. How much would they contribute? Again, it's all going to be anecdotal, but I think at this point, that's probably some of the best information we could have as we move forward. So just wanted to make those points. And I think we all are happy about the promise and excitement of this bill, and childcare is such a huge issue for so many, and it's so expensive. But I think with this information, we can hopefully, understand it a little more. So appreciate the conversation and look forward to coming back to it.
Great. Okay, I think we've got some good guidance here for our return. I just want to add to that again. I'm intrigued to find out how often generally employers contribute to employee FSAs for childcare. Is that something that doesn't really happen? And the goal here is for this county to kind of initiate that and to be known as a place where employers are frequently contributing to employee FSAs for childcare. That's an intriguing idea. And I think that's sort of what the bill is intending to do. But it'd be helpful to understand that more fully, and then to get a sense of, okay, if that's a key goal, then what kind of funding would need to go behind it in order to get to that point? Because that's like option A of how to use the bill. Option B is an economic development incentive that's highly targeted to a specific number of businesses that the county is already coming into contact with through recruitment or retention. So I'm interested in both potential avenues, and we've heard a lot of great comments from committee members this morning. So with no further ado, Christine, do you have any other questions about guidance for our next gathering?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll do so much more thorough research and work with my colleagues in Council Central staff and Department of Finance and come back with a fuller picture.
I'd recommend talking to MCEDC. I'm sure finance can facilitate that, but they might have some useful data.
We also have Vivian Yao or someone from Central staff that works on the policy piece of early care and education.
Yeah. Please do go through the committee video, I think, for all the pieces that council members raised. Councilmember Navarro said that. Andrew.
Yeah, I just want to know, I think Ms. Wellen's math earlier was correct. So 2,500, 50 employees, 125,000. So I didn't want her to get beaten up for lawyer math. I just wanted to.
Well, I knew better than to criticize or
Or to even ask the question.
Anyway,
all right. Anyone is excused for making a math mistake in my company, that's for sure, unless they work for the Department of Finance. All right, great. Thank you very much for this item. We'll move on to the next. Okay. Now, Vivian, yeah, we have a all-star lineup today.
Sorry. Good morning.
Good
I don't
morning.
know if you want to introduce the folks. who
Yeah,
are
yeah,
here.
absolutely. Yeah, I want to give everyone a second to turn the cameras on and great. Okay, so we are proceed. I'll just tee us up real briefly and ask. I'm sure my co-chair would make a comment and any others, but we are continuing a joint committee conversation about how to expand our effort here for out-of-school programming, especially in the context of the pandemic and in the what we hope will be the aftermath of the pandemic, although I suppose we should just continue to think about it as within the context of the pandemic. So we know that kids have had fewer opportunities for, gathering in person through every element of their life, for the past 2 years now almost. And we know that that we have a lot of programs that have been affected by that, fewer kids enrolled, but B, looking forward to the need and the opportunity to expand on that. So we've been building a number of collaborations, and we're going to hear about those today. There's a specific goal today, which is the Joint Committee has asked for the partners to tell us how they could expand their programming in the remainder of this year, with an eye to also the summer and next year. And so I know we all want to come out of this meeting with a concrete set of steps to put appropriations before the council to act on those ideas that we requested as a joint committee, I think in November. So it could have been October, but and then our budget year goes through June. It ends at the end of June, and then the new budget year starts in July. So part of this is it's kind of a two-step. We want to add some funding for the remainder of this year for as school is in, and or planning for the summer, so that organizations, they would already need to be spending a summer's initiative funding in June and earlier for planning. So, we want to have a continuous expenditure of funds through the summer. And so we want to make sure that organizations are planning on that, that there's both a spring and a summer expansion of opportunities that are built in, and then that funding is used to be able to offer that in a continuous manner. We certainly don't want to have situations where the funding is provided, but at that point it's too late to do the planning and to, fund the partners and to have it all rolling. So just as a little bit of context, again, I think we're looking to take action quickly. Time is running out. It's Monday, January 24th. We got to get this money out the door so that our partners can get to work and get these kids, having happy, productive time together, in a great, safe, and again, productive environment. So with that, thank you, Vivian, for your work. The packet is, it's an opus. There's a lot going on here, and I just appreciate your being able to put it together into one. It's a broad and deep agenda. We've got a lot of partners on with us today, and they're going to share about their work, and then we can proceed. So to my co-chair, Councilmember and Education Chair Craig Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Co-Chair Reamer. I really appreciate it. And, you know, it's very interesting. The CDC is very clear in terms of its guidance about the benefits of out-of-school time and talks about from a health and wellness perspective in terms of affecting healthcare disparities, as well as from an education perspective when it comes to supporting academic performance, and also from a mental health perspective when they're using evidence-based practices to actually enhance the personal and social skills that are linked with positive social behaviors. That is incredibly important. So as you said, Mr. Co-Chair, all those things that we know are impacted by the pandemic are certainly ones that we can help to address and help to mitigate by having strong and effective out-of-school time programs that are offered for our children, not only before and after school, but also over the summer. And I really want to thank all of the collaborators that are here today who have stepped up in the midst of the pandemic to try and ensure that we were achieving just that. What the CDC has outlined via guidance in terms of how we can make sure we're helping our children. And so from that perspective, I look forward to this conversation today, but agree wholeheartedly with the packet that basically says, if you read it for summary, we need to make sure that we're going to do everything we can to budget for these programs in the upcoming budget because we know that our kids need it. That's the bottom line. And we see it in terms of some of the myriad of challenges that we see in our schools and in our greater community. It is something that is incredibly important, not just to get us through the pandemic, but also for helping our children achieve and become even more successful than they already have been. And so that's what's on the line. And so we've got to make sure we get it right. There are many programs that are out there that are tried and true that have been doing for so long. Councilmember Navarro knows all too well. We've gotten tired of saying, how much can we expand these programs that we know are working and are doing great things? And then we've got new programs like our Equity Hub, stood up by the Black and Brown Coalition, and Collaboration Council and Children's Opportunity Fund, all coming together, that stood up in the midst of the pandemic. And the school system wisely said, wait a minute, we need to reinstitute these because we need to make sure that they're going to be there for our kids, because we may have some of our schools that are shutting down. This is an example of how, again, not only doing the same things that we know are working, but also being open to new and innovative things that continue to get us to where we need to be is going to be incredibly important. And as you said, Mr. Co-Chair, it is going to be something that is going to be with us for a while, even with the pandemic being gone. And even if we've reached that light at the end of the tunnel, the damage has already been done. And we need to do everything we can to repair our kids, to make sure that we're giving them all the supports that they need so that they can continue to be successful. So thank you very much for the opportunity to just highlight why this is so important, and to thank all of our partners that are on the call today for their continued support and commitment to making sure that that happens.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Rice, for those comments as well. I believe that when we had this conversation the last time, we were coming together because we understood that the pandemic had highlighted so many things for us at so many levels. And this one in particular was an item that we understood was critical because it provided such important support, especially to the school system, so that we could mitigate a lot of the impact. And now here we are, still navigating through this other wave that has only added to the chaos and the disruption that our young people have felt. The sustained disruption and the impact on mental health is obviously a grave concern. And so I too want to add my voice of gratitude to all of you, because all of you stepped up, not just in your own particular areas of expertise, but also provided a pivot in many cases to offer other kinds of supports to help us through this pandemic. That is really laudable because no one, as I've always said, had a manual. I do want to go back to this conversation we had last time around the notion of how can we, I think, once and for all, institute an initiative that is scalable. You know, the same way that we approached our early care and education initiative, where we said, hey, let's start with this 4-year plan to sort of boost this piece with targets and, you know, money behind it and all of that. We absolutely need to do the same for out of school time. Again, especially now, because I am convinced that what this pandemic has done in terms of its disruption, many of these pieces, we cannot just go back to the way things were, right? But that it offers an opportunity for innovation. It offers an opportunity to rethink how we're supporting our students, how we're complementing the educational aspect of it, the day of schooling. But, you know, we have been talking about so many of the other areas in which, you know, quality, accessible after school time can have a positive impact on families and students. So I just hope that as we are talking about, you know, immediate funding for the upcoming budget, et cetera, I would personally really like to see a proposal for, even if it's, you know, 4 years for now, like we did the early care and education, at least to get it going, of a bold approach, because I don't think now is just a nice to do thing. I think it's essential. So I just want to offer that as we start having this conversation. And then, of course, look at all the possible areas of funding coming through the federal government, the state. But I think we need to do that because, you know, awesome that the equity hubs were stood up and awesome that everybody turned around. But, you know, it was stressful. I know it was. It's stressful for the providers. It's stressful for the families. You know, wouldn't it be awesome if we just had such a robust system in place that then all you had to do was just tweak a couple of things to react to something versus scrambling all the time? You know, we're beyond that. So I just put that out there as a request. Again, thank you to all of you for doing such extraordinary things for our families and our children in our county.
Comments. Thank you. Completely agree with what you're saying. You know, I've also said for some time, I think we need a universal after school programming in the county. And Councilmember Navarro, you took the lead years ago on summer with the Bell Initiative that you created and helped to fund. And, you know, I just think to your point, we do need a multi-year, step-by-step, comprehensive plan to get to universal out of school time programming. And it covers, you know, weekdays and summer that is affordable. You know, it doesn't have to be free for every child in the county. It has to be affordable for every child and their family in the county. And, you know, that would be obviously various according to ability, but, you know, it has to be wherever you are in the county, there's an option for you. That's a real option and it's a great option. To my co-chair, you know, we maybe could follow up with Vivian after this meeting and set a spring meeting and request that we come back at that meeting with models, you know, visions or strategies for how to make that possible, and then talk about those. You know, as we did with pre-K and childcare, which, you know, I think the council's work on that issue contributed significantly to what ultimately became the blueprint and what is anticipated to be significant funding from the federal and state government, you know, to add to the county funding to help us achieve a significant, you know, level of affordability in pre-K and childcare. Those pieces are still coming together. So it's, you know, I think it's hard for us to exactly know how it's all going to work out, but we know that in the next year or two or three, like everything's going to change there. And we'd like to see the same kind of progress in out of school time programming. So great. So we'll confer, Vivian, with you after this, and excellent. Thank you, Councilmember Navarro, for that comment. Okay, so Councilmember Jawando, and then if there are any other council members who want to speak, otherwise we'll turn to Vivian and we'll introduce everyone who's here, and then we'll proceed. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, and appreciate the opening comments and remarks. And I appreciate Ms. Yao for, as you always do, encapsulating, when we had this meeting in November, the very first bullet you put, it was increased funding and services in FY22 as part of a multi-year expansion effort that provides funding predictability. So we've all reiterated it. And this is something that I know we have talked about on the ENC committee and on the PHED committee and the full council since I've been on the council, which is hard to believe, entering the 4th year here. And previous councils, I'm sure this was discussed as well. I know there's been a meeting going on with all the partners, so I hope to hear from today. Like, I don't want to wait to the spring, I want to hear what's going on with the multi-year, because we've been talking about multi-year plan for a long time. And so I would love to hear today at this meeting with this group. And when I've spoken, not just in the committee, but offline with various people that are doing this around the county with county government, there's been a meeting that's been happening, my understanding, with internal to county government about how to produce this plan, because it's going to cost it will cost money over time, and we need to be able to go in the budget process and start laying groundwork for that, like as has just been said. And so I don't want to kick it too far to the spring, and I know everyone shares my urgency. I just really think we need something to get started on, as soon as possible. Doesn't have to be perfect. So we can go to the public and say, this is why we need it. We're in a crisis. The kids are not all right. And this has made everything worse. And so here we're accelerating this, and we're going to add and change it over time, and people will understand that, but we have to make a robust investment in these programs right now. I don't want to see another OLO report next year that talks about which schools don't have after school, and we're bemoaning that fact. We have to move right now. You have a willingness from everyone here to do it. And so I just want to, if there are impediments to that, staffing, we should talk about all those things, but let's really get to a point where we can make a robust investment. So I just wanted to start us off with that. And I appreciate the conversation from colleagues who have said similar sentiments. Thank you.
Thank you. Spring's not that far away. It's only about a month away, month and a half. Okay, well, we will follow up with Vivian and seek to identify, our earliest opportunity for a conversation. But
I had my hand up.
Yeah, I was coming right to you.
Thank you. No, before I forget that point, I would agree. I think that so we do have a pretty good template. I mean, I think the Early Care and Education Initiative provides a pretty good template for what we could do in this space. We have all the partners who have all the data. We have, partnership with the school system to get the data. So I really don't think that it should be that complex. If we are able to at least put together the template, then we can begin to cost it out. And that's exactly what happened with the Early Care and Education Initiative in my presidency. It was basically identifying the goals, incorporating, what we already had in place, so we could leverage what we had in place, because we're not starting from scratch, which is great. And then setting the metrics and the goals for each year, which I think was very successful, because even through all of this, folks have continued to work on reaching these goals. And then we had just assigned the price tag. So I do believe that this can definitely come together. It has been said a few times that we've talked about this before. I know I did request this last time as well. And so, I understand everybody has been extraordinarily busy, but just wanted to add that I would agree with Councilmember Jawando that, it should not be this hard to put it together. We have all the pieces in place, and we should take advantage of the budget coming up to figure out if we can do at least a down payment and get it going. So want to register that.
Great. So we'll proceed in and again, very much anticipating coming out today with some specific appropriation next steps. All right. Vivian.
Good morning. So we have a great crew of folks who are joining us today in this discussion. Ramona Bell Pearson, Director of the Communities of Public Facilities. Robin Riley, Director of the Department of Recreation. Adrian Clutter, who's a Division Chief for Programs with the Department of Recreation. Barbara Andrews will be representing DHHS. She is the Administrator for Early Childhood Services. Shanae Tate is the Director of Programs for the Montgomery County Collaboration Council for Children, Youth, and Families. Kimberly Rusnak, the Project Director of the Children's Opportunity Fund. Byron Johns, the co-founder of the Black and Brown Coalition for Educational Equity and Excellence. Dana Edwards, she is the Chief of Office of District-Wide Services and Supports for MCPS. Nicole Allen, who is the Executive Director for the Office of District-Wide Services and Supports. Scott Murphy, Director of College and Career Readiness and District-Wide Programs. And Nichelle Owens, Chief School Support and Improvement Office. So those are folks who are going to be with us. We will receive a briefing or an update from MCPS on their out-of-school time efforts, including their work on non-instructional days, partnering with various stakeholders, as well as updates from the recent work group on out-of-school time programs. The Joint Committee will have the opportunity then to consider recommendations needed for fiscal year 22 appropriations, including maintaining the current level of service being offered by providers, and also any opportunities for expanded service. One thing that council staff wanted to note is we've heard a lot from various stakeholders about the need for systems support and infrastructure, including, from the Children's Opportunity Fund and the Collaboration Council, that the work in order to, reach the folks that we want to and provide a quality out of school time system of high quality services, we need to really invest in community engagement, assessing needs and demands, capacity building, technical assistance and training of out-of-school time providers, evaluation and, outcomes development and measurement, and all these different things. And, right now, we really don't have funding or much funding at all that is directed towards these system building efforts. So I just wanted to, get that out in front too, not only investing in direct services, but also making sure that those services are meeting, the needs of folks as well as they're of high quality. And lastly, the Joint Committee will have an opportunity to provide feedback to the county executive in terms of, maintaining and expanding services added by the council. So that's what we'll be working through today. So up is the school system in terms of their presentation to the Joint Committee.
Perfect. All right. Welcome to our MCPS leaders.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you are doing well. Thank you for having us this morning to just provide an update on the work that we have been doing collaboratively with everyone on this screen around out of school time for this year, as well as to forecast for the coming year. It has definitely been a joy to be able to pilot this program this year and really think about the necessary resources for our students. So wanted to share with you just where we are in terms of an update, because we've had two legs of this work that have been very important. This year is more of a pilot year for us, and we were really trying to learn what the necessary needs are and really how to curate a program that's going to be beneficial for all students. And so we've taken an opportunity to really analyze and work collaboratively with others to really learn what our program offerings are at each level, as well as to understand what we offer and what we don't offer on days in which students are not in session, which are our professional days, our early release days, and during some of the time during our winter break. We've implemented a pilot program throughout the year, and today is actually a professional day for us, and today is an out of school time day. This has been new for MCPS this year, to really think about days when kids are not in school, such as winter break and professional days, to be able to offer programming. So for today, we are offering in-person options, virtual options, as well as some student service learning opportunities. I do really want to thank Adrienne and Ramona in being able to support the utilization of the recreational department and really offering opportunities for students throughout the county. Also for the soccerplex that's being offered. And we're also partnered with the Smithsonian as well as Montgomery County Libraries to be able to provide opportunities for students. With that, we also know in order to stand up a program, we want to continue to expand our partnerships, looking internally within Montgomery County as well as externally. Because we're in a pandemic, it opens a great opportunity for students to be able to access programming across the nation, and for those to do it in person as well as virtually. The one thing that was highlighted as well that we looked at as definitely a component of out of school time programming this year was the reinvigoration of the equity hubs, working very closely with Children's Opportunity Fund as well as the Black and Brown Coalition, and really being able to do that in a swift amount of time so that students are within those locations today receiving instruction and really being able to have the support that they need. And then our work group was critical as we really plan for next year to move this from a pilot to an actual program that will definitely meet the needs and take into account the recommendations from our work group. On the next slide, one of the critical spaces for us, as I talked about some of our non-instructional days, definitely being able to promote those events, understanding how families wanted those promoted and being able to articulate that in multiple languages and multiple ways, and provide scholarships to many families who were in need of the necessary financial components in order to attend activities. One component that has been difficult for us to really determine how to really move around would be the transportation. We really want to be able to consider when families have to be at work and when students want to participate in out of school time opportunities, how to be able to offer them legs of transportation that would be able to provide them an easy and accessible way that regardless of where they are for those in-person opportunities, we definitely want to be able to do that. Our families also shared with us, and so did our work group, that one place in order to identify the menu of services. And so we did create a website that is fully accessible at all times for people to be able to go to. And I cannot say enough just around the partnerships and the true collaboration that we have had with the Children's Opportunity Fund, the Kid Museum, as well as with the Recreational Department this year. But as I said, today is an out of school time day, and our children are experiencing a plethora of opportunities that really do meet their needs as well as their particular interests. And that's what we want to continue to build on. In the introduction, Vivian shared that we'd also share about what's coming for next year, and I think that part is critical. One of the big pieces that we've done is we've really taken time this year to work with with everyone that you see on the screen to really look and work with our multi-stakeholders to really build a sustainable program moving into next year. Our voids that we know are before school and really legitimizing that opportunity for students. The professional days we want to expand out. As I said today, we have about 40 opportunities, but we believe that we should have more, as well as weekends for our students. And so to make sure that we're moving in the right direction, we will be hosting focus groups with families and really sitting on Zoom and talking and learning more around what their needs are, as well as with our students, so that we can sink into what those definite spaces will be. One of the critical spaces that we've learned over this year is that our program offerings in elementary schools are not as robust as our offerings within our secondary schools. And we really want to be able to balance that out in such a way to be able to provide chances for students to experience things that they stated are interests for them, and or to bring in programming that directly relate to being able to support the academic as well as social emotional needs moving forward in the future. So we do look forward to being able to share those components, as well as to build out the necessary partnerships and sustain the partnerships that we have based on data and based on needs that have been identified within that work group. On the last slide are just some really big highlights and an overview that we will share with our board on February the 24th regarding the updates from the work group and the things that we'd like to do in the future that we see are needs, not only based on that collaboration, but also based on the information that we gather through the focus groups. Next slide, please. So we definitely want to be able to increase the awareness around out of school time. We know it as out of school time. Many people know it as extracurricular opportunities or programs that they can access on the weekend. So we have to find what is the right terminology so that we know that our families are able to access that. As I shared earlier, the elementary programming is a space that we definitely want to be able to expand on in a real systematic way. That's going to be able to promote a source of equity for our students and a source of where there's exposure for them as well. In addition, I shared around just the barrier of transportation and really being able to have our students be able to access different opportunities around the county, considering language that may also, as we translate information and considering the needs of students in different communities and the cost. We have been able to offer scholarships for families who are in need of scholarships to be able to support that, but we also want to be able to work with some of our partners to see in how they can elevate that opportunity with the services that they provide us. And our partnerships continue to remain essential to us, primarily because of the staffing shortages that we have experienced for this year, and understanding that it takes not only the staff within MCPS, but also other partners that we have outside of MCPS to really be able to offer robust programming. And so as we prepare for the summer, we definitely want to make sure that there's a wraparound opportunity for our students who will experience summer school this summer. The summer school experience is the academic component, which is a portion and a focus, one layer of focus for out of school time programming. But what we know is that summer school is only half a day. So we want to consider how is it that we offer programming that students would be interested in and or need the second part of the day that would give them a space to either stay where they are and or to go to other places within the system. We've been really proud of some of the meetings that we've held with some of our future partners, such as BlackRock, the Olney Children's Theater, as well as many of our African-American fraternities and sororities who are seeking to do groups with many of our students within the schools and or stand up community service opportunities. And we see these as nice complements to some of the summer school programming and to take throughout the school year. We definitely want to continue to look at the logistics, but then to really have programming for our students that really meets their physical and emotional well-being. Later this year, we will be offering a huge opportunity across the system focused on out of school time. One day during spring break, it will be our wellness day, and we will offer multiple opportunities for students to be able to sink in, some with their families, they will be able to sink in for physical, social, emotional, and mental wellness throughout the system. And so that will take multiple layers of partners for us to do, but we do recognize that doing this work, we can't do it alone. And that's the beauty of the programming and what we'd like to offer. That's an update on kind of the two-prong approach that we've had this year of where we've been in terms of implementation of the pilot and really being able to build out some really good programming with our partners who are here on the phone, but as well as looking into the summer, as well as the fall and spring of next year to begin to adequately prepare to offer a more robust and coordinated effort for students and families. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Great presentation. Okay. So there's a lot there. I don't know if my colleagues have comments, but Vivian has suggested that we may want to convey to the executive that funding for these wraparound summer programs delivered by public and private providers should be a high priority for FY23, the budget recommendation that we're about to get. And I definitely agree with that. So, and a next step we could certainly take would be sending a joint committee letter to the executive, just kind of outlining some of these discussion points and recommending that the budget that we receive have as much funding as possible set aside for these initiatives. So I'll just turn it to my co-chair, get any comment he might have, but otherwise, yeah, I think that seems like a sensible step, and I see Councilmember Dwanda would make a comment.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. And so let me say this. I know that there's been a lot of programming that's been done by our Montgomery County Public Schools. I also know that there's a lot of funding that's been pulled down via CARES funding and other types that have accentuated MCPS's budget. So I just want to make sure that at the same time as we certainly want to support and make sure that we're standing up the programs, that there is the fiscal need before we just go and run and allocate money. So I just want to make sure that from that standpoint, we understand whether or not MCPS is able to do that within the current framework of the additional dollars that they've received via CARES, via initial round of funding for Blueprint, et cetera, that has amounted to tens of millions of dollars. So just want to make sure I understand, is there a funding need, or is this more of just from a programming perspective, we just need to make sure that the supports are there from outside the system to ensure that this goes off without a hitch? So that's my first question.
Well, that's a great question. We could ask MCPS for some comments in response, and I'll turn it to you, Councilmember Dwanda.
So the programming is definitely a space in which we are seeking support. We do have our partnerships unit that is pre-established. So we are still securing programming to be able to look at different partners. I mentioned a few that we are definitely working with. We have funds from our ESSER funding that we received from the federal government that we do utilize to be able to support students with scholarships. And also we will be utilizing that throughout the year. Much of that was on a limited term because remember, this is a pilot. So we are not 100% geared up. We are not offering on every professional day and every half day. So as we look to see what else we bring in, we will definitely seek that opportunity to be able to determine what the cost will be. The other component I did share about transportation, I think, is a critical space as we think about it, especially on early release days. The early release day is the one that's the question mark for us. And even as we think about some of our equity hubs, we are navigating students now into the actual schools in which they are. Once the pandemic lifts, if we continue this model, then how would we then, one, run our bus routes where we know we have a staffing shortage, which we definitely need to do, but also be able to offer the transportation component and not necessarily place our younger students on public transportation. That would be a critical component that we wouldn't want to do. So at this point, I would say for this year, we are able to maintain, primarily because we are in a pilot space. For next year, as we continue to build out and think bigger and brighter and better and make it a full-scale program, our work with our partners is critical, but we will need to look at what that definite need is. And I think we will know that closer as we kind of pull in and really structure the recommendations from the work group. As well as once we hear from the focus groups and kind of think about a multi-year plan.
Okay. My understanding is that some of your partners, however, are requesting that funding could be made available in order to partner with MCPS. So could we hear a little bit about that? I think the Children's Opportunity Fund, KID, I don't know those partners are necessarily on the Zoom, but I want to separate out,
They're here. I see Children's Opportunity Fund here.
Yeah,
right.
Children's Opportunity Fund is here, right?
Yeah.
So we could hear a bit from them. And again, there's multiple things going on. We want to express our intent that the programs be funded. I think that was kind of the idea with the letter that could come from the Joint Committee to the executive, is to ensure that there is a high level of a focus and intentionality about having the programmatic piece covered, and whether it requires an appropriation for MCPS or what the budget recommendation is, we don't know. We just want all of the staff to be driving towards that objective in the FY23 budget that we receive. So that was sort of A. B is there an immediate short-term need for funding? We do have requests from partner organizations to be able to work with MCPS to fulfill the objectives that you've outlined, which is part of the package. So we could turn to, for example, Children's Opportunity Fund, I think, for some comments here.
Sure. So good morning, everyone. So thank you for the opportunity to talk and share and explain to you a little bit what we've kind of been doing around the non-school days. So we have been partnering with childcare providers as well as Kid Museum to provide scholarships so that kids can get access to a safe place to be on those non-school days. So for example, on November 4th, Children's Opportunity Fund provided busing through Coughlin, through a private bus company, and advertised with support from MCPS, advertised at 2 different schools, Georgian Forest and Twin Brook, to solicit and find families who were interested in having a low-cost full-day activity on those non-school days. And so through the outreach that MCPS did, we got about 15 students who went and spent November 4th at Kid Museum. Food was provided for students, transportation was provided for students, and it was a great day. And all 15 of those kids had never been to Kid Museum before, so it really was a great day for all. I can share pictures and videos with you guys if you want to see them, but we would love to be able to do that at a larger scale and with more students and connecting more schools. Especially as there are more non-school days moving forward. And same with childcare providers. Many of the childcare providers are open on site, on school sites on those non-school days. And if we can partner with MCPS to find families who need care during those non-school days. We're happy to work with child care providers to figure out how to facilitate those relationships. And for the Kid Museum pilot, we did request families to pay a $10 fee just because we were doing it 2 weeks before the date. And we wanted to make sure that if families were signing up, that this was really something that they were going to commit to and would be there for. And so that's what we did for that Kid Museum non-school day, but we're open and flexible to different ways of kind of piloting and innovating around those non-school days and figuring out how to help kids get access to care on those days.
Sure. And as an initial foray, there isn't as much experience or track record there in the school and with the families, but if it repeats, then
right,
it becomes something that folks are accustomed to, and they'll be quicker to sign up and so on and so forth. Okay. Great. So we do have an opportunity to, we have specific requests from Children's Opportunity Fund and the Kid Museum to continue to expand on these kind of programs. So I think we can circle back to that towards, later in the packet, but it is intended to meet that need.
Mr. Co-Chair, if I may, just very quickly, just to reclaim that conversation with MCPS, I think that there are two different, and this was highlighted in the initial comments that were made, there's two different pieces when we're looking at this from a budgetary perspective. One, which will be for this current budget, and then the other, which is that long-term aspect of what it is that we see as how we're going to prepare for the future. And you heard that from Ms. Edwards, but you also heard that from Councilmember Navarro at the beginning and Councilmember Joando, who were saying we want to see this new way of looking at this that does extend beyond just this budgetary year, that comes up with that plan of how it is that we're going to enhance these services year over year, like you had said when we did with ECEI and other kinds of things. So from that standpoint, there's two different pieces here, and that's why I want to highlight and make sure that MCPS had what they needed for this current year to do what it is that they need to, but then also that we're looking at how to then take that from the pilot level to that next level of expansion, similar and akin to what we've done with other programs within the school system that also partner with our nonprofit providers in the greater community. So just wanted to make sure that we were delineating those two different buckets of the space. And so certainly supportive of Children's Opportunity Fund and what we need to do there, as well as what we're going to do with Black and Brown Coalition and others, and recreation. Although recreation says that they may have all of their money, so I'd love to hear from them from that perspective as well. I know that our folks are always conservative when it comes to internal government and making ends meet when we really need to be giving them all they need to be successful. So just wanted to highlight that, but I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Well, we do need. I know Councilmember Joando's been, has had his hand raised, so I want to turn to him. But we need to come back to REC and the other partners. The way I see this here so far, REC is waiting for the budget for any increases. My concern is we need a structure so that expenditures can be made in June that are associated with an increase of effort for the whole summer. And that is not in the FY22 budget. And so if we want them to be able to execute programs in June, July, and August, we've got to add funding in FY22 to make it clear there's continuity of service. So to your point, I think REC hasn't made that request, but I think we can make that request that the expanded level of effort will happen this summer, and there's a smooth path to plan for it and then to be executing it in June, and then drawing from the new resources of the FY23 budget for July and August. So the question is really April, May, and June. Councilmember Joando.
Thank you, Councilman Rice. You were done. Or I don't want to cut. Okay, Hannah. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Important discussion. I guess my one question to MCPS, and I know we're going to move to other partners. Councilmember Rice brought up the funding point. It's an important point. We were on a call with Senator Van Hollen the other day, and he reminded us that MCPS got more money than the county got from the, from the which appropriately so, from the the federal support, and so I think I don't expect you to pop out a spreadsheet right now, but I would personally, as a council member and education committee member, I would like to have more, and maybe this is to my colleagues on that committee as well, better understanding of how that money is being spent on this set of issues and other issues, so that we can appropriately, do what Councilmember Rice suggested, know where we need to support and how long that's going to last, and just have a very transparent conversation about that, because it is a lot of money. It's not going to be forever, but also to make sure that we have continuity of service and that we can set ourselves up for success in the long term. So, but I think this issue is a perfect example of an area where money is being used there, and we need to understand how that's happening. So, Ms. Edwards, if you and your team and whomever else could help us with that, that would be helpful. Okay.
Thank you for that. And yes, it sounds like a follow-up item in terms of what you shared, and we will be able to come back to the council with that. Great.
And I know you mentioned a board presentation on the 24th, and I'm assuming after that point, we'll get whatever is going to be presented. Can you at least tell us? I know I'm very sensitive of the nature of you need to present to the board first, and I know Councilman Navarro knows that, having been a former board member, and I want to do it the right way. But maybe if you just tell us what will be covered in that presentation as far as the topics, and then I know we'll get it shortly thereafter, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. And I appreciate your sensitivity to what needs to go to the board first. But during that time, we will review our pilot programs for this year, similar to what we did here, but we'll go a little bit more in depth. In addition, we will be able at that point to cumulatively discuss the data and the feedback and the input that we receive from our focus group areas that will drive programming for future years, as well as to talk about the outcome from the reimagining and our work with the multi-stakeholder group that will pull us into next year, thinking about it in a multi-year approach. With a program such as this that is extensive across our whole school system, where you work with hundreds of people to really stand this up, we do recognize that there are tiers, tier 1, year 2, and year 3, to really kind of build it out in a really comprehensive way.
Okay, so obviously we'll need to have follow-up with you after that point.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. And then just the last thing I want to bring up, you mentioned the one-stop shop and the need for that. Are you saying that you want to partner with someone to that, or you want to be that MCPS should be that one-stop shop?
One of the things that we've heard consistently, whether it be from students, our staff members, as well as our families, was that there was not a repository, a place for people to go to determine what is being offered or what out of school time really is. So for today, for example, what is accessible, what's available, how do people sign up, and what are the resources? Our one-stop shop turned into something as simple right now as a web page that we can send the link out, we can send the QR code out, we can also put it through Twitter very quickly for families as well as children to be able to access. And you're able to see almost the menu of services that are available for today. And so that's right now our repository in response to that. And we wanted to put that in prior to the end of the work group and prior to the actual board meeting, because it's an immediate need. And so it's really just an information source, but we definitely will be looking at how to build that out in a better way so that we do not disadvantage any group who may say that this is not the best way for me to receive information, and what is a better way for me to be able to access these resources.
All right, and I appreciate that. And I went to the website as you were speaking earlier, and you're right. And I appreciate you bringing up the elementary thing, for example. Like, you look at February, you look at today, there's nothing on the calendar for today. I mean, and my kids are stomping on me above, and so, so I think that's a serious need. And then also the definition of out of school time. I think in this context, you were describing it as these days where school is not happening, but obviously after school, before school, and it's not just MCPS's responsibility, it's the rest of the call here, and to make sure we're filling out the full breadth of out of school time. And I know we'll get to that, but I just want to be clear to folks watching that, we're not just talking about when MCPS isn't, they don't have, when they have a half day or off, we also are talking about the full range of services after school, those critical 3 to 7 hours, and the like, and obviously even before school too. So I appreciate that. I'll pass. We could talk about this forever, but that's helpful, and I'll pass on for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember Jawanda, if I could just say thank you for highlighting that it is about before, after school, as well as the days students aren't in session. Those are just new days for us this year that we've never really tapped into on those professional and early release days. So I will take that into account as we definitely move forward. And you are correct, the elementary school is our biggest void and the biggest space where we definitely know that we do need to offer additional support.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'd like to go back to Director Riley at REC and just hone in on this question of REC and needs that REC may have if we want to expand our efforts. If we want to do more than is otherwise planned and have it implemented in June and have the capacity to put that into motion in the run up to June, what kind of challenges would that present to you based on your existing resources available?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Thanks for the opportunity to be here and talk with everybody and really share the vision. I want to, obviously we're waiting on our OMB second quarter analysis to really determine where we are in our spending for this fiscal year and how much that we can reimagine and use to get us through the rest of this fiscal year. I want to go back to something that Councilmember Rice said, something about looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's something I heard recently that I want to steal, that we should be the light in the tunnel right now. And I think many of us are. And I think this opportunity to bring all these partners together in this really critical time has been super powerful, not just for the young people in our community and the families, but as an agency and as a government as well. It really has been really powerful, and we appreciate it. We've been doing a lot in terms of in the out of school time window, the kids day out program, and I'm going to punt to Adrian at some point just to really give you the details of it. I think we're thinking reimagining what our summer programs look like and partnering with MCPS to come in on the back end of the school, the academic day, to provide those wraparound services. So our food, fun, and fitness model that used to be just at lunchtime will now be sort of re-engineered and come in right after school ends at noon or 1 o'clock, and we'll be there till 6 in many sites. That's what we're imagining to try to implement, and I'll let Adrian fill in the details.
That's for summer school?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Some of the other things that, are sort of on our picture that we need to plan and really think about, quite honestly, that we, much like MCPS, hadn't really thought much about. I had a great conversation with a group of parents who have a portfolio of students who are in the virtual academy. I think there's around 3,000 students between kindergarten and high school that are going to school virtually. And they were really reaching out for an out of school time opportunity for their social, emotional, and physical wellness on a Saturday or evenings, because much like everybody here, they can't get off work and run the student to an after school program that's in existence now because they're working. So they were looking for another model. And so we're really working closely with them to see what that looks like and really see what that would cost and what days and times to provide those kinds of services. And I'll punt to Adrian to provide a lot more detail and scope on some of the other things, because she's been really working with all the partners in terms of what we're doing in the out of school time window. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Robin. I'll just go ahead and add a few things. I think, Robin hit the critical piece, which is we're planning for summer in the way that we hope it will be delivered. And I just want to thank everybody. Take a moment, because there's not one person on the screen that we, haven't worked with or been heavily involved with in terms of developing what I would refer to as the system. Some things that we're looking to do in the immediate future that we know are impactful coming to the need of students and what works, things like TeenWorks in our workforce development program, critical to keep young people engaged. We're looking at also adding a Teens Day Out component to the Kids Day Out to try to incorporate the middle school and high schoolers. Those are some of the unique immediate approaches, but of course our long-term vision includes Excel Beyond the Bell, Rec Extra, Rec Zone, and some of those other programs. I think a refocusing on high school, we haven't done that in quite some time. I think that there's a need there. One of the things that we talked about previously, and I know when we did a lot of work and much to the council's credit in terms of building systems, we talked about making sure that we had a continuum so that young people could go from a Excel Beyond the Bell elementary to a middle school to a high school program. So one of the things that the community has been expressing is interest in adding rec zones as well. Those are among a few things. And I would like to say that we look forward to the opportunity of trying to articulate what our system in recreation looks like. Certainly out of school time is our business, and we can't do it alone. We do it with all the partners provided here on the screen. But I will admit, and I take ownership in this, that we haven't done a good job in sort of articulating what the system is and the success that it's had. So I'd just like to take a moment to mention that we're in over 40 schools with Recreation Department, and that's in partnership with MCPS and Collaboration Council, so huge partner who not only helps us with the data to train all the staff, and I think that there's a need to expand the community of practice piece around preparing youth service providers, especially youth service providers, to engage with young people in crisis settings like we're in today. CUF, another big partner that helps to make sure that all of the facilities and spaces are ready for us, where a lot of our work, our capacity reaches well beyond the walls of our recreation centers. We've seen that recently where we're getting ready to start back with our basketball league that serves over 6,000 young people. So we are in over 40 schools, and I will say for something like Excel Beyond the Bell Middle School program, we've served over 15,000 young people to date in its inception. Since its inception, and that's pretty remarkable. And that's just one aspect of it. But again, that's where we're not doing a great job of articulating the impacts. And I know Councilmember Friedson had mentioned before his desire to really understand how we're measuring the quality and success. We do use systems like Colorado Trust, which has statistically valid instruments in terms of measuring program quality. Our big one for us is the Youth Program Quality Assessment, which is done through the Weichert Center on Youth Program Quality. We also work with Montgomery County Public Schools to do some more in-depth studies, which we've to date really only done around the middle school portion, which we know just from what I like to say, unofficial reports from looking at data at individual elementary schools, that we suspect that the elementary school Excel Beyond the Bell is even going to be more successful. But just to really give you a quick brief on that, our last summary was done in 2018 and 19, which was a summary of analysis on academic performance and school engagement amongst middle schoolers. And we know that there was a statistically significant, I can never get that out right, statistically significant difference for EBB participants than non-participants when the study was done. And what that means is EBB participants tended to be more likely than non-participants to attain the 50th national percentile in both MAP-R, MAP-M, and performance level 3 or higher, and performance level 4 or higher in both PARCC, ELA, and math scores, and have no ineligibility for extracurricular activities during the school year, which is remarkable. There was certainly a positive association with EBB participants, a higher one for grade 6 and 7, and it tailed off a little bit in grade 8, which we probably inherently knew, but it was especially evident for Black or African American and Hispanic students and those who were recipients of farms services. So what we haven't done well is doing a good job of sharing that information out and putting this package together, which I hope that we will, spend some time doing. But so our long-term plan, we had mentioned in the previous session that an Excel Beyond Bell Elementary opportunity for all of Title I schools would be certainly something that we'd like to consider. And what we also need to mention too is when we fund these resources and programs, the hundreds of small businesses, nonprofits, and youth development service providers that come along with this, that we then have to rely on their resources in order to deliver these services. So it is a vast network, and I hope that we can do a better job in the future of putting something together for you of what that network looks like. And so I will go ahead and stop there because I will keep going. I know
that's great. Great presentation. Wow. I love it. Thank you so much. And so much we could dive into there. I think everything tails off in 8th grade as far as I can tell. So, you know, from speaking from personal experience, so I don't know what the data shows there, but it's exciting to hear you've got actual analysis now of how your students fare, you know, in their school day performance. And that's just thrilling, and it fits with what we might expect. How many of the Title I schools are you in now? Or how many are you not in?
We are in 12 of the elementary schools with Excel Beyond the Bell, and we're excited to report that Crest Haven starts tomorrow. That was the new one. And Wheaton Woods starts on the 7th. Okay, that's great. Well done. Thank you for executing that. That was a big push for us here. And how many more Title I schools are there that are not covered? I would have to check on the list.
I don't know if anyone knows off the top of their head. It'd be nice to see if we couldn't get all of those covered in this year's budget, for example, talking about a strategy to expand our effort.
There would be 21, sir.
There's 21 total elementary.
21 more. 21 more that were not
21
in.
more. Well, that would be a lot for us. But, it would be nice to do more than 2 a year. That has sort of been our, between 2 and 4 a year has been our pattern. It'd be nice if we could do, 4 to 8 a year or 10 a year. Okay, well, I still am not hearing yet a specific response on whether there is existing funding to meet an expansion of summer programming. And I'd like to ask Vivian to just delve a little bit into that, and then I'll turn it to my colleagues who have raised their hand. Vivian. Yeah. Sorry, I thought you were unmuting.
Sorry about that.
Yes.
I'm like writing my notes. So I think what we've heard from Director Riley is that I guess we don't know the answer to that question yet, but we can certainly follow up after the session to explore and see what information we can get back from the executive. Certainly if, we can also explore the extent to which council would like to see specific, specific programming stood up or the amount, and we can make a request from the department to understand what budget limitations there are. So we'll follow up on that.
Okay. I think that's where we need to get to. I mean, it's hard. Yeah. We're sort of,
right.
We're not groping in the dark, but it's just hard to get our hands around something here. But I think we all want to see a big expansion of effort in the summer. We need to know what MCPS will be doing, and then where REC has to come in and other partners have to come in. And we need to get that funding in place now so that everyone knows it'll be there and they can plan and hire and staff up accordingly, because starting in July is not a feasible way to have summer programming.
We'll circle back to MCPS as well, because I think, the conversations right now are happening with the school system and with other key stakeholders. So we will circle back to all the stakeholders and solicit what is possible in moving forward.
And we do have specific requests before us now from the Collaboration Council, I think the Children's Opportunity Fund, Kid Museum, a few, we have some specific requests that we can propose to the council for funding now. So we'll make sure we get through that before we break today. Okay, so Councilmember Friedson, I think, is next, and then Councilmember Navarro.
Appreciate it. One question was going to be that point. Are we going to, take up some of the requests that are before us? I appreciate the fact that
You're a little quiet. You may, I don't know if you have.
Sorry, one question was going to be exactly what you just finished on, Mr. Co-Chair, which is, are we going to be acting on specific requests here? So I think that answered that question. I also think we have a couple specific requests, the Children Opportunity Fund requests. I don't know what the dollar amount is there. So I was interested in learning a little bit about, perhaps if there is a dollar amount associated, with that request, or if that's more of a follow-up conversation. So that is, perhaps my first question.
Okay, sorry, you want to direct that to Ms. Rusnak?
Yes, please.
Can I ask a follow-up? Which parts of the proposal? Because we put forward different types of work. One was really working on the systems level work and doing mapping and more focus groups and childcare training. And then the second part of it was really getting kids into programs more immediately. So I can probably.
I would suggest both, but separate. I would suggest that we have a number associated, or an amount associated with both of that work, but perhaps they not be seen as one request, but two, because we wouldn't necessarily have to do them both at the same time, and they may have different implementation dynamics.
Okay. I don't have those numbers right off the top of my head, but I can definitely get them and circle back to Vivian with those. And I think the other piece I just want to note, and I know Excel Beyond the Bell is a great program, and I know we want to get it in every Title I school, but I just want to note, and this is something that Children's Opportunity Fund, as we really are looking at the birth to age 8 strategy, it does not serve kindergarten and first grade students. And so in working with, for example, Wheaton Woods Elementary School, that's great. They're very excited to have 80 kids who will be starting EBB. The principal came to me and said, okay, what do I do with a family who's got a kindergartner and a 4th grader, and they need childcare, but they can't afford childcare, and their 5th grader can qualify for EBB, but what does their kindergartner do? So I just want to put that out there, that as much as it's a great program, and I know we've got great outcomes with it, I think we also need to really hone in on that younger students of kindergarten and 1st grade in Title I schools and community schools, because childcare is often not available in those schools or not accessible. So I think we need to think about some of those alternative supplemental options as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. I appreciate you raising it. I was going to make a similar, broader point. That's a more specific one, but just about this question of cradle to career and this conversation, I think it directly relates to the prior conversation we were having about, childcare. And I do think licensed childcare, ought to be part of this conversation as well, and the rebid process and some of the other, challenges and opportunities that we have there. I do think, there's a lot of amazing work that's happening. We've heard about some of it here. I think that we have an opportunity now to really connect the work in a better, systems-based approach, as was noted. And I think, some of the recommendation that you have put forward and Collaboration Council is talking about, will help us to do that. And so I do think that that's important. I think some of the other partner organizations like Kid Museum have been mentioned, I think are a really important part of this work. But I do think, licensed childcare, particularly licensed childcare that's already in a number of our schools, to think through how we better connect the work of what's happening through Department of Recreation, what's happening with private providers, what's happening at Kid Museum, what's happening with Collaboration Council, Children's Opportunity Fund, et cetera, And I think this is a good opportunity to work through that. I do think the dollar amount would be helpful, to know like what does this look like and how much is it going to cost and how quickly can we ramp that up.
Sure. And I'll just note, so right now we're running a program with funding that we got through the Maryland State Department of Education in 2 Title I schools working with childcare providers. So it's at Rolling Terrace and Strathmore. And both of those sites have 60 kids enrolled in their childcare programs, which is unheard of in most Title I schools. They usually do not have that many kids enrolled in their childcare programs. And it's a mixture of parents who are paying privately, students who are receiving state or county subsidies, as well as students who are being subsidized through the Children's Opportunity Fund spending. But with that, we're not only supporting childcare, but we're also bringing in Kid Museum as an enrichment for those kids to participate in twice a week. So it really is a blending of the enrichment opportunities that we have in our community, giving kids a safe place to be. And the schools have really commented that that it's helping a lot of kids with attendance, kids and families with attendance, because many of the kids who were referred were not attending school regularly, but now that they can be dropped off earlier or they can be at school until 6 o'clock, it has really helped with that regular attendance and participation and engagement of the parents. So yes, I will work on getting the budgetary amounts, but I think there are some other different creative options that we can look at.
Appreciate it. One of the other things that was raised, particularly in the Collaboration Council proposal, is access to space. And we certainly hear this a lot. We could do great things. We don't have space. Kid Museum, frankly, that's an issue that they have, frequently raised. If they had space to create the type of satellite hub type model that they have talked about, they need to have access to space. It might not just be in schools. It might be in, recreation facilities, it might be in libraries, it might be in private facilities that perhaps we haven't tapped into quite yet. Just wondering, this is CUP's core competency and what you do a great job doing. It may go beyond, frankly, though, what CUP has historically done, in terms of our public facilities, because we may need to tap into private facilities too. And I'm just wondering whether or not there might be an opportunity to leverage CUP to be able to address some of those issues with both an inventory of what might be available, an opportunity for private facilities to step up and provide their facilities for these types of purposes, either at a discounted rate or even for free. I think there are a lot of private sector resources that we could be tapping into, and some of them are not just who is willing to cut a check through Children's Opportunity Fund or Collaboration Council or other places, and just wondering if that is something that is being pursued, could be pursued, is an area of opportunity to do this work.
If I might step in.
Please.
In response to that, Councilman Friedson, we have worked very collaboratively with the Collaboration Council. I said that twice. Under what was sort of like an emergency situation when we were in the middle of COVID and all the schools were closed. And as you know, 86% of our resource for facilities are schools. And when the schools closed, then we're left with fields, outdoor, whatever other county agencies we could find or county agent facilities. And Collaboration Council had the ability to not only have outside vendors, but also outside facilities. And we were able to work a relationship with them where we were still within our mandate of only funding facilities by working with them to have the programming. And then they found outside locations. It was really creative. We only were able to do it like maybe 2 times, but we're working closely with them to see how we can structure something like that. And we're also looking to develop a package to take to the executive to see, do we need to make some changes from a legal standpoint, from a legislative standpoint, what needs to be done to expand CUF's authority to partner? Because the public-private partnership is something that has been successful for a lot of government agencies, and not just Montgomery County, but across the country. So that's what we're looking for in terms of that. And I will say, as far as sustainability with regard to things that like Kimberly is doing, we are trying to also work very closely with HHS to make sure that the families that they identify that say they can't afford childcare, that say they need it and obviously are using it through her programming, are also known to HHS to see if there's some type of partnering that can go on to help them apply for the Working Parents Assistance and some other programs that are in existence, because the sustainability comes from them being brought into the system once they're identified to us. So that's just an example of a couple of the things we've done.
Appreciate it. I'll just say, as we figure out the questions now and for the budget, about funding priorities, I think that the key is going to be not just funding programs, but thinking about the systems. And I think that's what has been the real takeaway from these multiple conversations here that we've had, that we have great programs and a lot of great work that's happening. We need systems building work where, we really have not done as well as we could or should. And so I think we're at this inflection point, this moment to figure out, how do we build up the system? And then over time, we can improve upon and expand upon the programs that we have, but we shouldn't just continue to fund programs in the absence of a real system understanding who's responsible for what and how all these different pieces work together. And so I hope as we make these decisions, both today and as we move forward, the budget and beyond, that we really think about that systems building piece of this, because I really do think that's been the real significant aspect of all the work that's happened with the working group with these joint committee conversations. So thanks, and I'll yield back.
All right. Councilmember Navarro, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so I sometimes understand why people get frustrated with government, because this conversation we've had a gazillion times, right? And so I don't want to sound a little salty here, but it is a little bit frustrating. I actually introduced the bill, I think it was like 6 years ago, so that we would prioritize using our public facilities for those providers who are serving residents under particular policy areas that we have deemed priorities: childcare, after school programs. And the rationale was that, and this was back in the day, that we don't have enough space for all these very important policy areas. So we're setting ourselves up, right? Because we say we have all this need, it's growing, we're going to invest in all of these programs, but then we don't have the space for those communities to be served appropriately. But then we have all these public facilities that, of course, are being rented out for various purposes, which is important. But then we have to make, a decision. Like, do we really mean that we want to serve these communities where they are? If the answer is yes, then we need to prioritize the use of our facilities, public facilities, starting there, and make sure that it's affordable, especially for our partners. But there was a lot of pushback, and we ended up with this program that was supposed to subsidize those partners who were providing services under those policy goals that we had identified. Of course, after school activities, early care and education, et cetera, were on top of that list. So I want to flag that as something that is so important. And it goes to your point, Councilmember Featon, about building systems, because we're so great in Montgomery County of having tons and tons and tons of programs and tons of really cool initiatives, yet we have not been able to systemically identify what is working and then scale it up. That was the purpose of Bell. It was like, let's test this. And if it's very successful, then how can we scale up? Which might mean that we may have to do away with some other programs because money is not finite. That work needs to continue. And that's what was kind of like the background when I proposed the Early Care and Education Initiative, was we need to start to create systems. Same thing with racial equity and social justice. We need to start embedding structural pieces into this. It's not the most fun thing to do, but it's absolutely necessary. Now this pandemic has absolutely created this sense of urgency. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation about, like, what do we have to do right now? And then what do we need to do at the same time to strengthen those systems? I really appreciate that. And so I want to make sure then that, if we are going to approve these requests, that we do that. But that we do need to once and for all just make a decision about, are we interested in building a system? Are we interested in truly putting forth something that we know it's going to be there anytime there's any crises? If we have a structure in the system, it wouldn't be so difficult. And so I just want to make that request once again. So excited to hear what REC has done in partnership. And Adrian, you're absolutely right. Like, we need to see this. And I think once we're able to see it, whether it's visually, however it is, then it'll be so much easier to go through the exercise of figuring out the gaps. That's going to be super important. So I just implore, because I feel like I just keep saying this over and over again and it gets exhausting, that we just figure out a mechanism, right? And maybe central staff can help us and folks in the administration. Can we set up can we think of a system, an exercise, whether it's crosswalk or whatever, that will give us the necessary information to dream up this structure, this very robust system. And then we can start figuring out what is phase 1 and what is phase 2, what is phase 3. If we can't do the 20 plus Title I schools right now, hey, can we do 5 and then in 4 years or 3 years, maybe we're done, but we got to start somewhere. If this pandemic has not taught us that, absent this type of approach as local government, we are going to continue to be in trouble. Not us here talking, but these families who now we know, those who had already been dealing with a lot of challenges, those challenges now have been exponentially exacerbated. Families that maybe were, middle class, were doing okay, etc., they have been impacted and now they're struggling. Like this is serious what's happening in our communities. And it is our responsibility to put those systems in place. So again, because I believe I said this last time we spoke and many times before, I honestly don't want to come back to a session where we're just talking about the same thing over and over again, right? Like there's just way too much work to do. I would like to come back to a session where we are reacting to a proposal, a blueprint, whatever you want to call it, that spells out the phases and has targets. And we attach the funding to it. And that way, at least we have something to do. And for now, we do need to move forward very quickly to approve the funding necessary to provide some relief to these families and these students. But this other piece, it's overdue and it needs to be, done once and for all. So I just want to put that out there again on the record, saying that we need to do that. And to be honest, I think that we should revisit that bill because the issue of space is super, super critical. Our early care and education initiative has a component there where DGS needs to identify possible, not just public facilities, but as it was mentioned, whether there are storefronts that we could convert. We have to get creative here, right? And so let's just use that same exact ask and then just embed it into this out of school initiative. And let's look at cups. I know that there's a model and it create revenue, but you know what? We need to start thinking outside the box because we have no choice. So do we need to pass a bill where we completely rearrange that model so that we can instead give our partners access to those facilities as a priority? Because especially in those communities when we have a lot of Title I schools, we need that access for parents, right? Transportation is a problem. We can solve it that way. We have the assets. We just need to stop, doing the same old thing. So that is another piece that I hope we will look at, maybe revisiting some kind of a bill to just do all of this. Thank you for indulging me. It's just that, again, we've had this conversation a lot. So I feel like we're in some matrix. I feel like we're in a loop. It's some kind of a weird matrix where we're just having the same conversation over and over. I would like to get out of that loop and let's just get it done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great. So we have definitely expressed our strong desire to return with a more comprehensive vision conversation in the near term. Let's bring it home here and move forward on funding requests. We've talked a bit about MCPS and our intent to send a letter encouraging the executive to ensure that programming is fully funded through through MCPS and with partners. The next major partner here would be REC, and we're going to follow up. Vivian will follow up to ascertain how REC can expand its programming with an FY22 supplemental that is intended to ensure that they can deliver programming in June and have the capacity to deliver that programming in May and April when they will need that capacity. So that will be our follow-up. CUPF, thank you for being here today and for your work. And as Councilmember Navarro said, utilizing that legislation that she had passed many years ago that creates funding for organizations that are serving disadvantaged kids. We have a specific recommendation from CUPF for an additional amount of funding of $125,000 to support the same level of youth activities in this spring as we have been already, supporting up until the spring. We would want to see that moving forward. I think we can come back here and just maybe take everything. Well, why don't we take things one at a time? So I think we can turn it, I'm trying to be mindful. It'd be great if we can close up here at noon. I don't know if that's possible, but I think it could be. So I'd like to just hear briefly from CUPF, and we can consider their recommendation and have a committee recommendation to introduce an appropriation along those lines. So I'll go to Ms. Bell Pearson. By the way, I want to thank you for highlighting the issue of equity for girls in sports. And I'm really excited about this evolving topic. I want to thank my staff, especially Jason Fasto and OLO. We had asked OLO to do a study on equity in sports, and that we have the report now, and it's going to be a big topic for us. And I'm really grateful to CUP for highlighting that as the need to rethink things and identify some new programming there. So we don't have to go into that today because it's an important topic, but we're going to be taking it up in a big way. I just wanted to flag that and express some appreciation. So Ramona, if you want to share with us, comments around the need that we asked you to tell us what it would take to support this level of programming, and you've responded.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Reamer. I wanted to identify, just for the record, the fact that we have identified 848 permits that were awarded during this period of time that the CARES funding was in place, which amounted to 46,543 permitted hours. And when I mention that, that doesn't mean that's all that we did. That's what we did based on the focus groups that we had that were identified as being of special interest, either a Title I, High Farms, any provider that was seeking grants under this program and ultimately received a permit would have to have identified a number of students that they were going to be serving that were from the focus group areas. So we felt this was very successful, which is where we came up with the $126,000 figure to say if we were to continue at the level we were able to hold during that CARES funding period, we would need an additional $125,000 to go through to the next fiscal year. I will say that we were able to articulate a dollar amount, even though we, like REC, are waiting for our second quarter spending analysis to understand what we actually have available for funding. We were able to identify that amount needed because this was under a program that was appropriated by the council as the FFAP. And so as a result, we were able to say we normally would have 75,000. We only have 33,000. I think the memo said 35, but since then there's been a little bit more work done. Approximately 33,000 left in the regular FFAP funding. Because we had the 500,000 on top of that, we were able to do a much higher level. We had students and kids that were able to have access to parks fields, which are high quality fields, to turf fields that they'd never been on before, to evening gymnasium used for basketball to get kids off the street. We had kids that were in summer camps that weren't able to go to summer camps. We worked closely with Recreation, Collaboration Council, with Children's Opportunity Fund, the Brown and Black Coalition, with municipalities. We worked closely with the providers. I can't say enough for the providers. I think that people don't realize how much they give to their communities. We have been able to use them to stand up equity hubs, to stand up distance learning hubs. We've been very successful in all the programming we've done, largely because the providers, they were with me from day one when schools closed, pushing to get back into the schools, showing how they could be safe and how they could have bubbles that would be pods that kept students from interacting unnecessarily to make a safe environment. They continue to do that now. Some of the issues we've had with the out of school time hasn't had as high a numbers as we'd hoped, because we've had to go back and forth with when there's high positivity ratings numbers, we have to reduce or chill our permits, which means things we had planned couldn't go forward. And some of what we're seeing, like today, for example, is a result of that, because we had to suspend permits in mid-December through the end of January because we were concerned about the high positivity rates, and working with the health officer, that was the recommendation. Starting February 1, we'll kick back up again. So this is what we've been going through back and forth. I will say that I have been trying to focus more on older students lately, because we've had a lot of interest in the K through, I don't know, 8th graders maybe. And there are a lot of programs between the EBB and other things that are in schools and providers, as I said. However, when you get to the high school, later middle school, high school level, the interest level changes and the need to attract students are different. So I am working closely, because on our ICB board is obviously the Montgomery College representatives. And I've been working closely with them to start talking about doing some programming that could then be used either using our facilities or their facilities, which we do have access to provide some programming, maybe coding classes and different things for students that are older that need to start thinking in terms of career in college. I also, before I yield the floor, I'd like to say thank you to our partners. As I mentioned before, we have had a great deal of success with this period of time between when the funds were issued to us, I believe in October, November of 2020 through now, December 31st, 2021. That's largely because the municipalities, Recreation, Children's Opportunity Fund, Coalition Council, Collaboration Council, HHS, the Positive Youth Development, all of these groups came together very excitedly and very receptive. All I had to do was put in a call or an email, and I had meetings within hours. And I can't say enough for MCPS, because they opened up their facilities. They made available meal services. They made available, where they could, transportation, because that's been a problem for all of us through this. But I have to say, we've all worked so collaboratively. You couldn't ask for better partners. So I just wanted to make sure I put that on the record.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great. Well, we're excited to see the support for sports continuing. I want to flag for you, we really, as a continuing conversation, need to ensure that organizations that serve disadvantaged kids are not being shut out due to historical permits. So please make that a focused area of exploration, because we don't want to layer our funding on top of previous existed structural issues that, make it hard for organizations to qualify for funding because they can't get permits. So just please be intentional there, as I know you are. Great. So we have,
Let's make a quick point on that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up. And Ms. Pearson, we can follow up at a later time, but my office kind of got down the rabbit hole on one of those issues too. We have these great facilities in communities that need them, but and it's not just with your facilities. It's just an issue field. It's an issue with a lot of things. They get booked up and we don't get the communities that they're in, the actual usage. So that I'm glad you brought that up, Chair Reamer. It's just something that we need to definitely dig into more and think about how we can support a change in policy or something to ameliorate that issue, because it is an issue. So
yeah, absolutely. And frankly, we need more fields. We got to get, this is totally another topic, but we got to get more fields into the permitting program. And I still think there are a lot of MCPS fields, like maybe middle school, maybe high school, where we could get more fields into the permitting program. And then the historical permits perhaps are less of a challenge because there's more field space available for those. I know that's a different one than what you just raised, but it's all part of that big picture. So thank you. So we have in response to our request, CUP has determined that $125,000 would be needed to support the same level of youth activities in the spring of 2022. Without objection, we'll move forward to draft that appropriation and then introduce that. Great. Let's turn to the Collaboration Council, which has provided us with some guidance. Again, I think some of this is sports focused. Let's turn to our partners here. Ms. Tate.
Good morning.
All right, great.
Shanae Tate with Collaboration Council. Thank you so much, Chair Reamer and Rice, for this opportunity. Yes, we've put forth a request for additional funding to support the level of funding that was so graciously provided by Council last fiscal year that really allowed us to mobilize a lot of our private providers of youth development and after school time, out of school time and after school programs during the spring and during the summer. We did launch with Council's funding and support the Montgomery County Community Youth Support and Engagement Programs, where providers were asked to identify private partners for space and to lift up those partnerships to provide spaces for programs that had been disenfranchised by MCPS closures. We had quite a few providers identify: churches, community organizations, HOA partners, that allowed them to program those spaces. So those dollars did move forward, and we were able to serve about 1,347 youth between spring and summer with those efforts. However, those dollars did sunset for the spring. We did have an additional appropriation happen for May 2021, of which we have about $100,000 left. Where we will launch additional spring break programming with that, and then the early summer weeks after MCPS closes. However, there will not be enough funding to keep the level of programming that we had at that time, as well as those youth sports initiative programs whose funding sunsetted at the end of 2021 will also no longer be funded by Collaboration Council without additional appropriations. We're hoping that this is an indicator of what a quarterly support would look like, $250,000 investment over a year to kind of maintain the level of grant making, program contracts, capacity building, training, monitoring for quality and evaluation of programs that Collaboration Council has been able to provide. So we're hoping that Council really doubles down on the investments that were made for the rest of this year, and that we can present a blueprint of those services that we can expand countywide for a year-round approach, year over year.
Thank you. I am looking at your proposal on circle page, it's on page 22 of 27 of the PDF, I guess circle 16. So your priority proposal is to convert current MCC LMB funds to an NDA starting in the current fiscal year. Is that right?
Sorry, ideally we were looking at the NDA structure if it would give us greater flexibility and ability to respond without delays to lift up program efforts. We have, with the contracting process, had some delays in opening open solicitations for programs and giving providers that leeway and that time that they needed to really plan their efforts. Because of how those funds kind of trickled down to Collaboration Council. But we're really open to whatever structure allows us to mobilize quickly the efforts and supports of the providers and those initial funds that they need to start up their programs, which has been a hardship for them.
Okay, so converting to an NDA would make you more responsive, would allow you to move quicker. Vivian?
There may be other structures that Council, is aware of besides an NDA. We're just open to whatever allows us that flexibility.
Right. That's and I understand that Collaboration Council and Department of Recreation are working on those issues. That's a separate issue than actually the amount that's needed to maintain programming.
Which is, and what is that? Because I don't.
It's $250.
thousand.
Oh, I see. It's the first. Okay, great. That's for the Youth Sports Initiative and the Youth Support and Engagement System. Okay, great. I was on the wrong page there. Great. Okay. Well, that's a great proposal. Any comments on that? We can move forward with that.
Let's
All right.
do it.
All right, let's do it. Super. Okay, so we'll proceed to introduce that appropriation. And let's move to our next partner, the Children's Opportunity Fund.
Great, thank you, everyone. So as I mentioned before, the work we put forward in the proposal was really looking at kind of a dual approach, really thinking about the systems level work as well as the direct service. And so with the systems level work, what we put forward was doing an initial mapping and looking at a few different Title I schools and communities where we know there is a lack of service or programs, and really trying to do some focus groups and listening with parents in the schools to understand what are some of the barriers. So for example, working with CUP, we know that I believe there are 22 elementary schools that currently don't have childcare, and I think 12 or 15 of those are Title I schools. 2 of them are schools that lost their providers this year, Kemp Mill and Georgian Forest. And we would love to work with those schools to figure out what are the barriers to children and families participating, and figure out if we could work with those childcare providers, very similar to how we're doing with Rolling Terrace and Strathmore, to reopen those childcare providers so that there could be programming available there, because those are not EBB elementary schools. And right now there really is no programming that's happening, at these schools.
Can I just make a quick comment on that? You know, I remember visiting New Hampshire State's elementary school years ago, and I started looking into this, and I realized that a lot of the childcare providers there, or after school providers there, you know, they are charging a rate of tuition that is basically a market rate of tuition for childcare. And that's kind of how they get access to the space. And so you're talking about families having to spend hundreds of dollars a month in order to send their kid there. And as a result, enrollment is extremely low. You know, you might have 10 or 15 kids in a school of 600 kids who are enrolled in a program. But that, in our understanding, that counted as having a program at the school. And it just, you know, it doesn't count. It's simply it's hard to distinguish that effort from any other private provider that is in that vicinity. You know, and what we need to be doing is providing programs at the school that large numbers of students can actually enjoy and benefit from. And that's what you're describing now, is how do you replace that, you know, that private model with some kind of hybrid model that allows for large enrollment.
Right. And I think a data point that we've never really tracked at a community is we've tracked whether or not childcare exists at schools, but we've never tracked what actual participation looks like with childcare at schools. And yes, when you look at Title I schools and even many focus schools, some of them only have 20 to 30 kids enrolled. And so it's the economic model for childcare providers to make that work is very difficult. And that's why actually in conversations with Barbara Andrews and HHS, we're looking at including in the analysis of cost of care, looking at the cost of care for school age providers. Because as we've done previous analyses of that in our community, we've looked solely at the 0 to 5 space and not really investigated that school age space. And I think part of what we've seen with the 2 providers we're working with right now, they are able to open up and serve 60 students and have families pay around $450 a month, which is what the local child care subsidy amount is for school age. But as we've started going to other providers, some of the other providers have said, we can't make that work. If every child, if 60 kids in our program were only paying us $450 a month, we can't make that work. The cost is too high. So I think that's where we really need to investigate that cost of care for school age and understanding what makes it more expensive for some providers than others. I have my hypotheses as to why, but I think we need to do the analysis to understand why. I see Barbara raised her hand. If you want to comment, go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the cost of quality care RFP that we have moving will include school-age childcare, and so can the supply and demand study. And we can recommend, particularly in the cost of care, when we get a provider in to do that work, we could recommend that they collaborate closely with the Collaboration Council, because if they're doing any focus groups or interviews, that would only inform the process.
Great. Okay, so let's get to brass tacks here. You've given us a lot of important opportunities.
So I worked on some of the financial numbers, so I do have those to share with you guys today.
Oh, great. Let's take a look.
So the mapping, we're working with Education 4-Point partners to help us with that. And so the contract with them is $74,250 to work with them this spring to work on the mapping with a handful of schools. And then focus groups, we did do some focus groups this fall in the Rockville area, which was really informative. And that's where we really heard for many families, especially around the Wheaton Woods area, that affordability and accessibility is still a major issue with out of school time programs. And as much as at Wheaton Woods, they do have a child care provider. Again, they've only got about 15 to 20 kids enrolled. And they do have EBB that's going to be starting serving 80 kids this next month, but there still is demand for more. And it really is also a workforce development issue as well, because parents want to get back to work, but if they can't afford before and after care, then it's really not an option for them. And so we would really like to be able to continue to do more of those focus groups outside of the Rockville area, just to make sure that the comments and information that we're hearing is the same. And what has also been interesting is that most parents have said that they really look to MCPS to tell them what programs exist in the community. And so I think it's great that MCPS is building out this website, which will list what are the different programs that exist, and that there have been more and more flyers going home in the backpacks of kids around childcare programs, EBB, and other programs, because that's where parents really seem to be looking to in order to figure out what's happening in the community in that out of school time space.
Okay.
So the focus groups we propose would be around 80,000 for us to work. This last fall, we worked with parents from the different schools to actually go out and do the research and organize the focus groups and listen to parents. It was really an empowering experience for those parents and community members to figure out and kind of connect their community. So that's doing the focus groups. And then the training for school-age childcare. So again, we had conversations with Barbara Andrews in the Child Care Resource Referral Center, as well as with Collaboration Council around adding additional trainings for school-age childcare. And really the vision that COF has for childcare in the school-age space is, how do we use childcare to be a complement to the school day? And how do we integrate literacy, math, social emotional learning into the childcare space? I mean, just in working with, we reached out to Wonders, who's going to help us develop a training that will be how to integrate literacy into the childcare space, also doing a racial equity training for school-age childcare providers, as well as trauma-informed care training for school-age providers. And those are trainings that are not currently offered by the Child Care Resource Referral Center or by Collaboration Council, really focused on this specific age group, which is really a specific priority that we feel like we should be looking at moving forward.
Okay, keep moving. Great.
So that one is about 50,000 in order to work on the training, and then we would like to offer the trainings at a lower subsidized rate, so that it would encourage more providers to participate in those trainings during the summer and moving into the fall, so that they would really be ready to kick things off in the fall. So those are all of the kind of systems level work that we're talking about. And then looking at more the direct service. So we would like to work with at least one or two other schools with the childcare program model, contracting model that we've built out right now with Rolling Terrace and Strathmore. And so to do that for the remainder of the school year, with one school serving 60 students at each site, would be $135,000 per school. So if council is interested in doing that, we would like to be able to reach out to a handful of those different schools and see which providers we could engage in that, so that we could expand immediate access. Then there's another model that we've been investigating with a community partner named Kiddo. So Kiddo is a web platform where they partner with a handful of different enrichment providers. So a karate program, the chess club, a lot of different, music programs. And what they would like to do and what they're doing in some non-Title I and non-focus schools is working with the PTAs to select whatever programs or clubs they want to have available after school, and then working with their platform to sign kids up. But what we would like to do is pilot this in a Title I school and be able to provide scholarships to the students so that there would be a discounted rate for parents and families to sign up for these different clubs that could be offered after school, and then also provide transportation home afterwards. So a model to do that per school would be $145,000 for the spring for 2 6 or 8 week sessions. I'm forgetting my details. So that's another model.
Great.
And then the last 2 things are related to Kid Museum and the non-school days. So Kid Museum would like to do family days at Kid Museum as they're opening up their new site in Bethesda. They put forward a proposal to us, the Children's Opportunity Fund, of $91,050 to implement family days with Kid Museum. And then Kid Museum also put forward community maker days to what we discussed before. How could they go to libraries, recreation centers, and other places within our community and be able to do Saturday kind of maker days? And their proposal they put forward was $125,000 to be able to do that. And then lastly is the piece related to the non-school days. So to continue to work with Kid Museum and other childcare providers who are on school sites to allow kids to have access to programs during the non-school days like today and or spring break that are coming up in the spring.
Great. Well, I think we should do all of those. So comments on those items from colleagues, and we'll hear any comments from Ms. Yao as well. But let's put those before us. Mr. Rice.
Yeah, so I think in a collective, we now that we have a cost associated with each of those items that weren't included in the packet, we need to look at it in the totality of what it is combined with all the other things. I think, again, Councilmember Navarro's point about strategy is key here. And so we want to make sure that we're seeing all of it in the breadth and in understanding what I'd asked MCPS about as well. When it comes to their initiatives, making sure that it meshes, understanding that some of this is outside of MCPS's realm. However, just making sure that all these connect, and with recreation as well. So now that we've had a chance to hear all of this, just kind of putting it all on paper and seeing how the fingers kind of intersect, I think will be important for us as we analyze this. Of course, we're supportive of all the different and great things that Children's Opportunity Fund is looking at doing and continuing to be innovative in terms of its thought approach of how we go about addressing the issues that are facing us that we highlighted at the opening of the meeting. But again, we have to be smart and strategic about what it is that we're doing. And so from that standpoint, just want to make sure that it all connects. So.
Absolutely. Well, I think a helpful way to do that would be to draft the appropriations and then circulate them, because once you put something on paper, then everybody has to react. I think we can drive the process by putting it forward and then sorting it out, recognizing, as you've said, that this is what we're putting on the table, and we'll get the feedback as we go and see how it might need to be revised. Ms. Navarro.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Drosnak, for that very comprehensive proposal. Of course, I really want to, reiterate that it would be super important. You just pointed out this question around affordability and how we might believe that, it's great that there is a childcare program there, but if nobody is attending, then we're not really achieving much. So when you do the focus groups, I would be very interested in see what kind of feedback you're getting in terms of where are those families then seeking some kind of support. I imagine that a lot of these students are at maybe even unlicensed family childcare arrangements for after school. So that would be important. And then also what the role of family childcare is in those areas where you find that would be really useful. And obviously, of course, making sure that your focus groups also targets folks in the immigrant community, et cetera, that are many times, especially low income, are the ones who don't seem to be accessing quality early care and education. That would be super important information for us to have. And again, thank you for
stepping up in such an incredible way during this pandemic to bring forth best practices in areas that we haven't seen before. And thank you to the other partners as well, Collaboration Council, MCPS, Rec Department, for doing exactly the same thing. Thank you.
Super. Okay, next steps here, we will draft appropriations as per our conversation today, and then circulate those to committee members. And they would be, I believe they would be under the ARPA, youth category, but let's sort that out. And try, once we put it on paper, we'll do a little bit more discussion about it here with stakeholders, and then proceed to introduce it as it is, or as it might be revised at our earliest opportunity. I think ideally, from everything I heard, it sounds like there's a lot of capacity building that's, needed for this year and next. So time is of the essence. Vivian.
So I just want to sort out a few of these things just to make sure I understand, what we are doing moving forward. One thing I did want to ask, and it's in relation to ARPA funding, is the council had identified specific priority areas for ARPA. And I think the one that's closest to these out of school time efforts is the mental health and mentorship resources. And I just want to make sure that the committee members are in agreement that category extends to the areas that we're talking about right now.
I certainly am. And I've seen my co-chair nodding. So yeah, and Ms. Navarro. Okay, so.
Okay, great.
Without objection.
So it sounds like there's a couple proposals that are. I want to see which of these proposals are ready to go and which ones needed to come back to committee. Is it that you're saying that all of them need to come back to committee before they go to council?
I think we would proceed. Yeah. So any comment on that? But I'd recommend we do the rest of the work before the body. But Councilmember Rice, did you want to comment?
Well, I think it's fine either way. I mean, obviously, once the information is out there with colleagues, we can discuss, and kind of express concerns that we have, whatever the case may be. So I don't know that we necessarily have to come back for a joint committee. The work can still be done with our staff, working with other council member staff, of course, with our lead sponsors, with Councilmember Navarro and Council President Albornoz. I think we can get the job done and don't need to have another one of these meetings, but can still have those discussions. So.
Got it. Okay, great.
Great. Okay. Is there anything else we have not touched on? Ms. Yao? I think we got it? Covered the packet?
I think that's it, yeah.
All right. Great work. Thank you to all of our partners for their collaboration in the run-up to this. And, now's a great time for us to move with alacrity. All right. We are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Appreciate it. All right.
Take care. Stay safe, everyone.